Hey, determine your software needs. Now, if this is the first time on the Zoho Showtime webinar, this is how you navigate through. So on the left-hand side, you see a column here with questions you can ask. There's polls and chats, etc. Now, I'm going to do a first poll and see if you can actually hear me. So if that is going to work out well, you should see the poll coming through. Is the audio coming through clearly? Yes, okay, we got votes here that the audio is getting through. Interaction is important. Also, feel free to use the questions on the side to ask questions. Here we go. So that's on the left-hand side. You see the questions here with the arrow mark. If you have a question, you can raise it over there or a comment. Down here, you see a little icon for notes. If you want to take notes in the webinar, you can do it in the webinar itself. And at the end of the webinar, when I exit it, don't close your window just yet. It will email the notes to you. So you don't have to open a separate application for that. On the right-hand side, you see the slide. So you will see presenter is here. You can browse back in slides as well. So if things are going a little bit too fast, feel free to browse back and ask a question on that slide. All right. Without further ado, let's just continue. So who am I? 25 years of experience in business applications. Actually, my first go live was in 1993, showing the gray hairs that come with that. I've done the work with top tier ERP systems like Baan, Siebel, Dynamics. Obviously, also been a user of SAP. And my preference is actually for the smaller systems for smaller businesses, and I'll tell you later on why. Now, I've worked for both very small and very large companies and vendors. So I've worked for the Capgemini in New Zealand, CGNZ, later on acquired by HP, HSO, and Microsoft. And my premise here is, and this is going back to, the top tier ERPs, and I put that between quote marks, is you can't simplify your business operations with a complex system, right? The idea is we make things simpler. You cannot make it simple by implementing something complex. And the requirements is the start of the journey. Very often what we write down as a requirement becomes actually a very complex thing because we don't know the limitations of those systems. And what we're going to walk through today is how you can actually start formulating those requirements that simplify your business. And it has actually nothing to do with the application or the technology. That comes later, but your requirements will drive you towards a solution. All right. So business applications, what are we talking about actually? And I mentioned some big names like SAP and Baan and Dynamics. Those are business applications, but actually it's a lot more. And you'd be surprised on how many applications you currently have in your environment. I break them down in 3 different elements. So you got your productivity and collaboration. And those are your spreadsheets, your documents like Microsoft Word and Excel, and your presentations, your email, your chat, your phone bridge if you got your phones connected to your IT systems. Even your document store and share like Dropbox. Those are all business applications. But also you have your customer engagement application. Now, you use your marketing software for email marketing, social marketing, like MailChimp, Hootsuite, etc. You have sales like the CRM systems, support systems, etc. So there's actually a lot more software in the business applications that we usually give ourselves credit for. And then finally in the back office, and that's where we think the first thing of business apps, right? Accounting software and HR software, payroll, the boring stuff, as we'd like to call it in sales, but very important for the business. But the whole collective here, productivity, collaboration, customer engagement, and back office form your suite of business applications. And therefore your requirements will link back into that suite. All right. So what do we do when we actually implement something new? We don't do it to maintain the status quo, right? No one is going to spend a lot of money to keep things the same as they were. you want to change something, right? But you don't want to just solve today's problem. And I compare that to the infrastructure projects. If a government were to solve an infrastructure problem, they're not looking only at today's problem. They're looking at, okay, how's this going to work in 10 years? You know, what kind of growth are we going to have? Does that still fit? So think of your business in the same way. Is if something is a bottleneck today, you can take away that bottleneck. But any business has a target to grow. So will that bottleneck come in next year then? So what happens if your business was 2 times the size or 4 times the size or even 10 times the size of now? What is the breaking point? How far ahead can you plan? So planning ahead is planning for your capacity. Now, that doesn't mean you have to start everything at once. You're not going to build a $1 million business system if you're only with 3 or 4 users. You're going to build a system that fits the 3 or 4 users, but you lay the infrastructure ready to grow ahead. So that you build it to last, right? But not like the pyramids as a final structure. You lay the foundations to can build on top of it. So you build fast, but you also replace fast if you replace small components. So as an example, if I set up my infrastructure, which is the email and the document shares that I have, etc., I may not set up immediately my inter-office Connect suite like Microsoft Teams or Slack or the Zoho speak Click. I may not want to use that straight away because we're all sitting in the same open plan office and it doesn't matter, right? But you could actually start thinking about, okay, but later on I'm going to open that extra office somewhere else. Is it then, how hard is it for me to switch on those applications, right? So you build it ready to build on top of the foundation, and you replace the components very quickly, the small bits that don't work for you with new bits that fit into that same infrastructure. So you plan ahead, but don't build everything at once. You build so you can upgrade and replace components, and you build the infrastructure so you can add those components. Now, when you actually start doing that, you're already very close to formulating some requirements on how you're going to go into your business. So, for example, if your requirements are simple, your system can be simple, right? But it's very tempting to make requirements more complex. And what drives complexity in requirements is exceptions. For every rule, I can think of 5 exceptions, 6 exceptions, 10 exceptions. And you're kind of trying to mitigate every eventuality that can happen in your business. So the trick is to look at, okay, how often is this going to happen? And how big is the impact really? A key driver of complexity here is we want everything integrated. What actually should be asked is, okay, we want as much integrated as possible at this particular cost. Very often I hear clients say, okay, I need my invoicing integrated into my accounting system, and the invoicing comes from a separate part. Sounds logical. We all want to have that integrated. But if you then look at, okay, how many invoices do you do in the week? The answer was 5, right? So if you do 5 invoices in the week, it is actually simpler just to have a simple data dump and export, or sometimes even manual can be easier than importing. So look at the frequency, the volumes, etc. Because complexity, it compounds. As soon as you make something complex, it becomes very difficult to make it easier. Right. So if you look at your own business, you can see things that over time that seem like great ideas compounded onto other great ideas, and all of a sudden it becomes a complex system. That is the complexity compounding. And I think Esther Dijkstra said it very well. Simplicity is a great virtue, but it requires hard work to achieve it and education to appreciate it. And he also noted that what makes matters worse is that complexity sells better. So your salesperson selling you this latest and greatest application will go, oh, but we are so great. We can handle all your complex scenarios. And you feel good because you buy a system that can handle it. And then again, going back to the first rule, you can't make your system simpler, your business simpler, by implementing a complex system. So simplicity is key. All right. So how do you get to the requirements themselves? And this is a key point. So traditionally, what people will do is they come up with a list of things that the system shall do. So the system shall, and then something comes out. And mostly that is written from the perspective of the old system. I was in a organization that did timesheets. It's a couple of years ago, and they were going in for a new system to do also timesheets. But the way they did timesheets was in units of 6 minutes. So every hour had 10 units of each 6 minutes because they didn't actually have the concept of time in their system. So their requirement was that the system must allow for 10 unit hours, so that the hour was divided in 10 6-minute units. The system that we provided was one that said, well, actually, you just write your minutes, so the time. So if you start at 10 a.m. and you finish at 10:30, that would just be 30 minutes. In their case, it would be 5 units. Um, those requirements actually cause extra work. It's based on the current system's shortcoming or limitation. So don't be careful with it. Don't write it from your perspective of what your current system does. Don't let your system's current limitation become the requirement of the new one. Um, and another fallacy that happens quite a bit is like, well, I want everything that my current system has, but then make it better. So basically, the analogy here is you have a car and you want everything of your current car plus all the other goodies. And what we know usually with cars is you have a trade-off, same as with systems. If you're going to get X, you may sacrifice a little bit on Y. So for instance, well, the new version of this car is slightly larger. The flip side is it is also slightly heavier, and therefore it will consume a little bit more gasoline. You can't have both. And with a system, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, what are the elements of my requirements that I'm willing to sacrifice in order to get that big gain? Because not every feature is worth the same thing. And then finally, is don't make everything a must have. If you're going for a new system, there are going to be requirements that you say, well, yeah, it would be great to have, but I can live without it. Because the must have, I must have this and I must have that. The immediate question you should ask after that is, okay, but at what cost? Um, it tends to be that the further you perfect your system, the higher the cost is going to be, right? So these are the don't do this with requirements and setting it up. Now, the real challenge here obviously is how do I set up my requirements? What is a mechanism that we can use to do it? So we're not using the system as the old system as, the template. Um, what do I actually do? Do I only look at one area or do I look at my whole company? So what I recommend to do is build a capabilities map. The example given here is a very generic example, right? But look at your business. What does your business actually do and what outcome do you want to achieve? And what you'll find is it's surprisingly standard. 80% of the business will have exactly the same capabilities map. Maybe a little bit different between a manufacturer and a service provider because you have different capabilities. But overall, you got something to acquire and generate leads. You're going to sell stuff and you're going to deliver either services or an item. Now you can break these up a little bit further. You can say, okay, I'm going to generate leads. We got lead acquisition via social and lead acquisition via email marketing and lead acquisition via trade shows. And I've split them up as 3 different capabilities. That's totally fine. But it's still capabilities of generate leads. And beyond that, if we go lower than that, it's lead conversion management, etc. So they're kind of the same over to every business. So 80% of all business will have similar 80% of the capabilities will be at every business. It doesn't matter what you do, you still need to do accounting and payroll. Now, how this works is a very simple block diagram. And you have to imagine the customer on the top and your accounting and back office below. And in between that, that's where the things start happening in your systems. So what you do in those capabilities, saying, okay, what do we actually do for our customers? That's your top block. You acquire your customers, you sell to your customers, you deliver to your customers. You go down a further. Okay, now I've sold to because what's the process that we follow in converting leads and what is the customer account management we do internally? What are the operations involved with delivery? Is it service delivery, capacity planning, or do I deliver actual physical goods and items? Um, the inventory management part. Okay, how do I manage my warehouses? Do I manage warehouses? Right, this could be a block that's off the chart here. So look at your business and start building this very simple block. And if you find the blocks are too big and there's just too much in there, split them out. That's okay. That's totally fine. But it allows you then to basically build a entire business capability. Now, don't limit it just for your application that you want to change. So let's say you want to change your CRM system. And you go like, okay, well then my accounting I don't need to put on the block. But what is interesting in the block is how you can now visualize the transactions flowing between your CRM system and your delivery system. And we know that the delivery system has to talk to the accounting system, otherwise you can't evaluate your stock. So look at how you can um, 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 imagine those integration points. How does it integrate now, for instance? So in your current business, if you have a CRM system, how does that talk to your service capacity management? And should that talk to your service capacity management? Because CRM is obviously sales management, forward-looking capacity planning, so that actually hooks into each other. The same is with your generating leads, your lead funnel. Does that talk into your CRM? Do you actually have your leads in your CRM and see that funnel growing where the salespeople try to make the lead funnel flow them into a sales funnel? So they're actually all interrelated. And that's why there's a value in drawing that whole map on the screen. Has anyone drawn such a capabilities map before in their business? So just feel free to drop that down in the questions. Is that something that you would find very useful? Yes, that's correct. You do not. So the question is, do I need to do this only when I implement a business system, or can I do this at any particular time? Because it's just good to analyze what I currently have. That's a very good question. You can do this. Actually, you should do this. If you don't have a capabilities map right now, you should actually create one, whether or not you're implementing a new business system or looking for one. Because what you immediately find on a capabilities map is, okay, where in the process do I have a bottleneck, either with an integration to another process, or I don't have anything doing it. I don't have anything for it. So for instance, if you're saying, oh, well, we're having a problem with conversion of leads, but you actually have nothing that helps you with lead conversion. So you get a lot of leads coming in via email, and all you do is answering emails. How do you measure what's successful? Right? So it makes absolute sense to draw this map, even if you're currently not looking for something. So I hope that answered your question. All right. If there are any questions, just feel free to jot them down here in the box. All right. So let's continue. So I have now the capabilities, and I just zoomed in here the capabilities map a little bit, and you have to imagine your own capabilities map for that. How am I going to then write a proper requirement? And for me, what's very important is that it is a relatable requirement. So first of all, it needs to have an achievement, right? It's got to have an outcome. If you're just going to say the system shall, that's great, but why? To what end? What do you want to achieve? So what do we want to achieve? And the best way to write an requirement is actually the form of a user story. And a user is an actor. And a great story has got an actor, action, and an achievement. I call it a triple A story. So write a triple A story. An actor, that is a user. So for instance, let's assume I'm writing something for generate leads. Let's assume I'm writing a form on the website where people can register, right? So I would say, as a website visitor to your company, I would like to leave my details to receive updates. Now that's a triple A story. So because we got the actor, which is a visitor to your website, we have the action, because I want to leave my details, right? And we have the outcome, because I, as the visitor, want to receive the updates. So from that perspective, this is a very, very good user story. It's very relatable. The second one here is, as a marketing manager, I want to segment the mailing list so I can target mails to the need of the customer. So we got the actor, that's the marketing manager, and the marketing manager wants to segment the mailing list. So I'm going to send emails for the software companies, customers to this mailing list, and I want to send emails for people that buy the hardware to that mailing list. So this will be a simple segmentation. So the outcome is that customers get the mails that are appropriate to them from a marketing perspective, and therefore you have a higher uptake and higher sales funnel. So write your requirements in that sense. So again, actor, action, and achievement. The triple A story. Actor, action, and achievement. Do these examples make sense? Do you see that in your own business and maybe other areas, and how you can now formulate better requirements? Okay. All right. So the last thing here for requirements is Moscow. And Moscow is obviously a very beautiful city. If you haven't been there yet, I would definitely recommend it. I see, Michael, you're on the call. So if anyone wants to do a trip to Moscow, do contact 56 Parallel. They specialize in Russia tours. But that's not the Moscow I'm referring to here. Moscow is an acronym standing for must have, should have, could have, and won't have yet. It's very easy to remember. Moscow: must have, should have, could have, and won't have yet. Now, a must have are requirements that if you do not have them, you don't have a minimum viable product. Now, what's a minimum viable product? Let's say I'm building a car. The minimum viable product is a car that I can sell. So it must have a motor, it must have four wheels, it must have a steering wheel, probably some brakes and some lighting, and comply with the regulation. Those are must haves. The should haves are things that add the value. That's why people buy the car. So it probably should have leather seats. It should have a stereo system. It should have, some other luxuries like an air conditioning. All these things that you can buy a car and operate it without it, but you're probably not going to sell that car. So in your business system is, you must have certain things to comply with rules, regulations, and laws. Or if you don't have it, you have business standstill in your company. But there is no law stop. But if you only build that on must-haves, you get that bare bones system. And in essence, you could run your business from Microsoft Excel, right? That's just not going to make you very happy. So, but those are the must-have requirements. And then you have the should have requirements. Those are the ones that give you an additional value. So what I mentioned is let's say a stereo system or an air conditioning in the car, the cruise control, the things, the safety tech that is in there. Um, those become now should haves because they add value. Now, be careful with the car analogy. Obviously, a lot of should haves from 10 years ago are now regulated. So it's not entirely correct, but in your business, look at it. Like, what is a must have that I meet that bar from to operate so that my customers are not totally in the dark. To the should have is, how do I create so much value in my business, either by operating better or by saving costs, so that I create a better competitive position. So there's immediate value you can have from a should have, right? Now underneath there is the could haves. Those are, yeah, they're nice, but it's making a button blue or yellow. Blue may be better to see, but it's not changing the functionality, right? It just makes your users happy, which is a great thing to do. Those are the could haves. You could do them, and you probably should do some of them. Think around metallic paint on a car. It's not going to drive any better, or a specific mag wheels on the car. Not going to drive any better. It's not going to look any better from the inside. but still you could have them and people spend money on it, right? The final thing is the won't have, when I put between brackets yet. Never say no to anything, but it's just don't build just everything because it's there. And those are requirements that you just can't place at the moment. Or they're just so much out of the budget that you go like, you know what? Yeah, not quite yet, but we revisit it again in a year or so. You probably see those things as well in your business where you get a really funky automation that's coming in that really would make things a lot simpler, but it's going to cost you $200,000 to build, and the value that it provides is at this moment only $100,000. So that's a waste of money. So you lose the investment. That's a won't have yet, because when your business grows and you say 10x, you go like, okay, that won't have yet that I had 2 years ago or 5 years ago is now becoming a should have or even a must have. So keep them on the list so you know that you've thought about it, but it's just not yet for now. Does that make sense in your requirement setting? Is this something that you can apply in your business? Is there something that you want to add to this? Right, feel free to ask the questions in the question box. Oh, this is a very good one. So the question is, should I then only build the must and the should haves and then forget about the rest? No, not really. So what you try to do with these requirements, well, first of all, we're actually not yet in the planning of building, but what you try to do with setting up this classification of requirements is you know you can make some trade-offs, right? So you know that the must-haves, you can't make a trade-off. You can't say, oh, I'm going to do this one, but not that one. You got to do all of them, right? That's part of the minimum viable product. But with the should-haves and the could-haves, etc., you can make some trade-offs. So let's say you're building a business system. Let's say 2 years ago, you're building a business system or implementing something. And all of a sudden, the government comes in like, oh, you must have now single touch payroll. Okay, you need to deliver that, and it needs to be in a certain time frame because you got to comply with the law. You only have a few months left. You can't sacrifice any of the must-haves that you already have to deliver because again, it's business standstill. But what you could do is say, okay, I'm going to move in the single touch payroll, but from a similar amount of effort, I need to move out or move to a lower priority some of the should have and could have items so I can still deliver that and comply to the law. So it's always good to have in your project enough of the elements that, well, the should haves, they bring you value. So they actually usually are misknown as must-haves. They're not all of them, but they deliver value, so you should really do them. But a lot of the could-haves, it's good to do anyway or plan for them because that budget you can then swap for something that comes in unexpected or on issues that take longer to fix. And then you can say, hey, this is actually turning out a lot more difficult than I thought. We're going to keep working on this and we drop some of the could-haves out because they're lower value and we want to retain the same budget. So it's always good to have a mix of the must-haves, should-haves, and could-haves. It's only the won't-haves that you're just not doing yet. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Then we're flying through this one. And please keep the questions coming. It's important. The interaction is important. All right. Now here's a little rule of thumb. 80% of the value is in 20% of your features. So I'll say that again. 80% of the value is in 20% of your features. So the trick is to stack rank the features from value, from high value to low value. And all of a sudden you have still a lot of features left, but you go like, but they actually don't add that much value. For those that like, electronics, stereo equipment, you can make it very expensive to, get the most authentic sound. And the way that you, for the extra percentage of sound quality, all of a sudden you're spending $40,000 or $50,000 extra on top of that, of what you spent already. To get to an 80% of sound quality, you spend maybe $2,000 of an off-the-shelf, reasonably expensive amplifier, right? So the more features you build into your business system, the less value each feature is going to bring, right? So 80% of the value is in 20% of the features. Now, what are the features? Those are described by your user story. So if I say, hey, I want to have a list where I can enter my name, that's a feature. That list is a feature, and that represents value. So it's good to classify first Moscow, and second, go like, okay, what is actually that value that's represented? Because I don't want to spend 80% of my money on the last 20% of the features, right? A very good book to read on this is Scrum by Jeff Sutherland. It's about an agile delivery methodology, and that's also where I got the statistics from. And the book is called Scrum: How to Do Twice as Much in Half the Time. Very good book. So if you're implementing business systems or anything, actually, it is applying for not just IT, it's applicable for many things. Scrum, SCRUM. Right. So bringing it all together. So first thing to do is start with the business capability map. So who remembers what is the common feature of the business capability map? They are how different are they amongst the organizations? Yeah, that's correct. They're all the same. Well, not exactly the same. Obviously, there's a difference between a service company and a manufacturer, or yeah, so there are differences. A retailer always has slightly different capabilities, but you'll find most of them have lead generation, and all of them have accounting, right? So there's very limited variation in there. The variation is in the detail how they do things. Segment the stories into capability. So what you are writing out, you have your business capability and create stories underneath there. And then write the AAA story. So who remembers what was the AAA story? So just type in the question there, the AAA story. What does the AAA stand for? The 3 A's of a good story. All right, I see some answers coming in. And please keep typing. It's the best way to remember stuff. All right. So action, that's good. An actor. So actor is the person. So actor, action, and achievement. So that was the third one. You think about outcome, but it's achievement. So a great story has an actor. It has an action. Something is happening. Someone is doing something. And it has an outcome, which is the achievement. And again, to relate it back to the website visitor that wants to leave their details as a website visitor, that's the actor. I want to leave my details. That's the action in order to receive targeted mail or a callback or whatever it is. And that's the achievement. That's what they want to achieve. So write all your business outcomes. Like if you don't have an achievement with something, think very carefully. Do you really need to do this? Right? So if there's no achievement, there's an actor and there's an action, but no achievement, no one can think of why we're doing it. Really ask very hard, clearly, like, okay, do I really need this? Can I make this simpler? Right? And a very good quote by Einstein is, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. So if the answer is, can I make it simpler? Great, go for it. If the answer is, no, I really can't make this any simpler because it's a must-have requirement or whatever it is, then you've gotten to the point where you want to be. All right. Does this make sense? Yeah? All right. Now, finally, apply the Moscow. You all remember what the Moscow stood for? And again, feel free to type that into the questions or otherwise into the notes, in the handouts. And yes, it stands for must have, should have, could have, and won't have. A very good way to look at your project is if you can fill it with 65% of effort is on the must have requirements, and then the remainder on the should have and could have. And typically, I would say 25% on the should have and then 10% on the could have requirements. Then you build yourself a risk buffer. So you have a budget. And if the budget runs down and you start delivering against the must-haves and all the stuff, something else comes in, you can still move some of the should-haves and could-haves out. But if you just keep delivering, the chances are you will deliver everything that you need to have for the minimum viable product. Most likely you deliver everything for the should-have requirements that add you that extra value. And you probably get some of the could-haves in, which means you already have anything, and you're not over budget. So by putting it in this way and looking at those variables, you have a great way of maintaining budget risk. The question is obviously, do you have enough should have and could have requirements? Because I go to a lot of companies and I look to the requirements list, and maybe they got 300 requirements, and there's only 15 that are not must have. Well, you know what's going to happen, right? Is you're running through the project and there's not much room to play in that budget. So what I then have to do is say, okay, look, this is a budget for the must have. I'm just gonna ask you to budget for this much of buffer. We call it contingency in a project. So I'm going to ask you to budget for so much contingency because there's simply not enough room to play between the should haves and the could haves. Right. Now, this is also very important if you're dealing with your own requirements. It's very difficult to say like, oh, but I'm expecting everything and I'm okay to let some things go. Um, the reason why the should haves and could haves are not must haves is that you are able to let them go. So if you're going to say like, yeah, but I still want all the should haves and could haves no matter what, then you might as well have not done the Moscow classification. The only lever that you can have then is dollars, right? You can't play with your scope anymore to manage your dollars. So the Moscow acronym is there in place to manage your budget. So because you can have a variable scope that you're willing to sacrifice. If you're not willing to sacrifice that, you're taking away that lever, and then the only thing you can have is your budget, which is extra money. And probably also extra time, right? So apply Moscow very seriously because that's the only thing that's standing between you and a budget overrun at this stage. And as we know, the statistics on business systems projects they're not in our favor, right? We're talking about 60 to 70% of them will fail, and an even larger percent of them, well, they will succeed but over budget. And 90% of those cases is because the Moscow is not applied. Everything became a must-have. And no one asked the question at what cost until it was too late. Okay. Now, and finally, arrange those requirements by value. So is 80% of the values achieved in 20% of the requirements? Obviously, you start with the most valuable thing first, right? You want to achieve that value. And then you can actually stop and say, you know what, it's enough. I'm already done. Extra money spent on this is going to cost me so much more money that value I will never make back. There's no return on investment. If you just don't do the arrange by value, you may leave these golden nuggets all the way to the end of your project when you've run out of budget and you're not making that value. So do arrange it by value as much as you can. All right, does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So this then concludes the webinar for today. So we've talked about how to set up the capabilities, how to plan your infrastructure to be future-proof, how to create AAA user stories, and Moscow and value. The next webinar is we're talking more around the delivery and how we can use Agile. And if you have heard of Agile, it's buzzing, it's booming for the last decade. It is definitely the better delivery methods from all the other delivery methods for IT projects, especially if you're not really clear on what you're going to deliver. So do sign up for next week. I'm going to publish that the sign up link shortly. And you can also read and sign up to the blog. A lot of blog around projects and around requirements and around Agile, etc. If you're not a Zoho One user, I know some of you are already, but I also see some new people here that may not have used Zoho One. Check us out on the website, www.aurelian-group.com. There's a 30-day free trial for Zoho One, which is all the applications that you need in your business, which is for $50 Australian per month. If I'm not mistaken, you can get it in US dollar if you pay annually. I think it drops down to 30 US and 30 euros for those overseas. All right. Thank you so much for joining. I'll be sending a link with the recording over, and if you do want to stick around, there is a small feedback that I would ask you, and also you can suggest there topics that you want to see in the next webinar. So thank you so much, and have a great remainder of your evening.